The endless expanse of the Zephyrian homeworld's twilight sky stretched above me like a canvas painted with subtle strokes of violet and amber. The twin suns had long dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a cooling breeze that whispered through the towering crystalline spires of Virelis, our capital city. The scent of ionized air mingled with the faint metallic tang of the recent rain, a reminder that even in this advanced era, nature held its quiet dominion. I sat within the dimly lit chamber of the old war hall, the walls etched with the scars and symbols of countless battles. The murmurs of young officers training elsewhere in the complex drifted faintly through the air, but here in this moment, silence reigned. My mind, however, was far from still. I was Zeph'wind, once a commander among the fleets that patrolled the outer reaches of our star cluster. Now, I was a relic, a living archive of conflicts that shaped not only Zephyrian history, but the collective destiny of many species across the spiral arms. My claws traced the carved glyphs on the ancient table before me, the wood worn smooth by generations of hands. It was here, in these very halls, that I first heard tales of the humans, those unpredictable, stubborn creatures from Earth, a blue-green orb nestled in a quiet corner of the Milky Way. Admirals who had once looked upon their kind with contempt could not have predicted how deeply those tales would intertwine with our own fate. The air was thick with the weight of memory. I recalled the day the Zephyrian Admiralty received the first distress call from the Coalition's frontier, near the Theta Prime system. It was an isolated outpost on the edge of known space, a place where new species were cataloged and, occasionally, where trouble brewed. The Coalition, an alliance of varied species including ourselves, maintained a fragile peace, but tensions simmered beneath the surface. The humans, newly admitted and still proving their worth, were often underestimated by traditionalists. I had been among those who doubted them, believing their bravado masked naivety. The scene unfolded vividly in my mind: the bleak, rocky terrain of Theta Prime, bathed in a pale, sickly light from its broken sun. The air smelled faintly of sulfur and ozone, a harsh environment for any species. Amidst the craggy cliffs, human soldiers moved with a strange kind of urgency, their armor clinking softly, voices low but firm. Their commander, Maria Torres, stood erect despite the chaos around her, her gaze sharp and unwavering. I remember the way the dust clung to her uniform, the faint sheen of sweat on her brow as she directed her troops. They were surrounded, outnumbered by unknown aggressors whose motives were as veiled as their faces behind their armor. I had been a distant observer then, my ship hovering in geosynchronous orbit, sensors tracking enemy movements. The Zephyrian fleet prepared to engage, following standard protocols: overwhelming power, decisive strikes, minimal risk to our own. But the humans defied expectations. Rather than retreat or cower, they held their ground with a ferocity that unsettled even the most seasoned Zephyrian admirals. Maria's orders were sharp, her tactics unorthodox, but effective. She maneuvered her squad through narrow passes, using the terrain to their advantage, exploiting weaknesses in enemy formations that our scanners barely detected. The tension was palpable as ion blasters cracked through the mist, the sharp staccato of combat punctuating the eerie silence of the wasteland. I watched, fascinated and uneasy, as Maria's team executed a series of flanking maneuvers that forced the adversaries to scatter. The air filled with the acrid stench of burning circuitry and ozone. The taste of stress lingered on my tongue as I leaned closer to the viewport. It was in that moment that I understood the humans fought not just with weapons, but with an indomitable will that no amount of firepower could easily extinguish. Despite our advanced technology and centuries of military tradition, we had underestimated something far more potent: human spite. It was a spite born from millennia of survival against impossible odds, a spite that fueled their tenacity and ingenuity. Where other species saw hopelessness, they saw opportunity. Where others hesitated, they surged forward with reckless determination. This spirit did not merely clash with our expectations, it tore them apart. I remember the moment when the enemy, sensing defeat, attempted to negotiate. Our admirals, pride wounded and numerical superiority intact, expected the humans to yield. Yet Maria refused even the slightest hint of surrender. Instead, she initiated negotiations instantly, not from a place of weakness, but from calculated strategy. Her eyes, fierce and unblinking, conveyed a message clearer than any words: "We may negotiate, but do not mistake this for submission." This instant pivot from combat to diplomacy was unlike anything the Zephyrian command had encountered. The enemy, caught off guard by the humans' unyielding disposition, faltered. The negotiations that followed were tense, fraught with cautious words and unspoken threats. Yet they unfolded with a swift efficiency born of necessity and sharp intellect. It was a masterstroke. The humans leveraged their reputation for unpredictability to force a stalemate, turning potential annihilation into survival and, ultimately, into alliance. The memory of Aersec, the coalition's lead scientist, standing beside me as we observed these events, remains vivid. His analytical mind struggled to reconcile the humans' aggressive pragmatism with our own methodical doctrines. He spoke softly, marveling at how a species so new to the interstellar stage could rewrite the rules of engagement overnight. I, too, realized that this moment marked the beginning of a new era in military strategy, one where human doctrine would come to be feared and respected in equal measure. As the hours passed and the stars shifted beyond the domed skylight, I could still feel the echo of those battles reverberating in my bones. The Zephyrian Admirals' initial misjudgment of human resolve was not merely an error, it was a lesson etched in the crucible of fire and blood. This lesson shaped the coalition's future, forging bonds through adversity and mutual respect. It compelled us to reconsider how we assessed strength, not just in firepower or numbers, but in spirit and unyielding purpose. Here, in the quiet of the war hall, I traced the jagged scars on my forearm, souvenirs of that first engagement. They pulsed with a dull heat, reminders of the cost we paid to understand human spite. Across the galaxy, stories of that day spread like wildfire, reshaping perceptions and strategies alike. The humans, once an underestimated fringe species, had become a cornerstone of coalition defense, their commanders revered for tactics that blended sheer grit with shrewd diplomacy. The room grew colder as night deepened, but within me, a fire still burned. I knew that the tale I carried was not just my own. It belonged to every Zephyrian who had encountered humanity, and to humanity itself. Our shared history was a tapestry woven from clashes and compromises, from moments of brutal combat and instant negotiations. It was a story of respect won against the odds, a testament to the power of spite when wielded with cunning and resolve. And so I prepared to tell this story to the next generation of warriors and scholars alike. They needed to understand why the Zephyrian admirals had once underestimated human spite, and how that misjudgment forever changed the course of galactic history. The negotiations had begun instantly, yes, but beneath that swift political dance lay a deeper truth. No species should ever underestimate the fierce, unbreakable will of humanity. The air in the war room was heavy, thick with the scent of recycled metal and faint traces of scorched circuitry. A reminder of battles fought and lost, victories carved out in the crucible of conflict. Zeph'wind's 3 eyes flickered, with a dull amber light beneath his ridged brow, as he reclined against the cold polymer chair. The hum of the starship's engines, vibrating through the floorboards, sensing with the pulse of his own heart, around him. The walls were adorned with holographic displays frozen on tactical maps, the faint blue glow illuminating his angular features in sharp relief. He inhaled slowly, the odor of ionized air mixing with the faint musk of his own pheromones. A signature scent of the Zephyrian military, a breed hardened not by ease, but by relentless endurance. Memories churned behind his eyes, fragments of a time when humans first stepped onto the cosmic stage, their presence a challenge wrapped in enigma and raw, unyielding grit. The Zephyrians had been confident. Their fleets, sleek and elegant as the currents of their homeworld's winds, had danced through the void with practiced precision. Admirals prided themselves on their strategic mastery, their campaigns executed like a symphony of deadly grace. Yet, when the humans arrived, it was not the symphony they expected but a brutal cacophony. A tempest raging against every expectation. Zeph'wind's mind drifted back to that fateful encounter on the barren moon of Calthar. The frozen wasteland stretched endlessly beneath a bruised violet sky, the icy winds howling through jagged crags like the mournful cries of forgotten spirits. The Zephyrian fleet had descended with calculated finesse, their ships slicing through the atmosphere with lethal elegance. The humans were supposed to be mere obstacles, primitive and predictable, easy to contain or eradicate. But Maria Torres, the human commander, and her motley crew had defied every prediction. They displayed a stubbornness that was almost alien in its intensity. No matter how many times the Zephyrians pressed their assaults, the humans refused to yield. Their soldiers, like Jake Torres, Maria's younger brother, known for his relentless spirit, endured freezing temperatures that would have crippled even the hardiest Zephyrian warriors. They moved through blizzards with hardened resolve, their breaths steaming in the frigid air, weapons clutched in frostbitten hands that never faltered. Zeph'wind recalled the eerie silence before the first clash, a calm that masked the brewing storm. The Zephyrian sharpshooters had taken positions along the ridges, their plasma rifles humming softly, eyes narrowed against the glare of the frozen sun. Below, the humans trudged forward in harsh, ragged lines, their silhouettes ghostly against the snow. Then the first shots rang out, sharp and unforgiving. The taste of ozone and burnt metal hung in the air as plasma bolts streaked through the icy mist. Zeph'wind's squad advanced with disciplined precision, coordinating their strikes with the cold efficiency of seasoned hunters. Yet, for every Zephyrian soldier fallen, 2 humans seemed to take their place, relentless and unforgiving. What astonished him most was not their firepower, which was conventional, but their endurance. While Zephyrian warriors relied on agility and speed, humans exhibited an iron-blooded persistence that defied logic. Jake Torres had been a testament to this. Days without sleep, wounds left untreated, starvation and frostbite. They pushed through all, eyes burning with the fire of unyielding spite against the alien invaders. The Zephyrian commander's mind filled with the sensory memory of that night. The bitter cold biting into his armored suit, the crunch of snow beneath heavy boots, the crackling static of comms filled with frantic calls and terse commands. The humans' movements were jagged but purposeful, their morale bolstered by a fierce camaraderie that seemed to echo in their every step. It wasn't just the physical endurance that unnerved Zeph'wind. It was the emotional tenacity, the refusal to submit that radiated from their very souls. One particular moment stood out, etched indelibly into his memory. A sudden blizzard had descended, visibility reduced to mere meters. The Zephyrians seized the opportunity to flank the humans. Moving silently through the whipping snow, Zeph'wind's squad was poised to deliver the decisive blow when a sudden roar shattered the tempest's howl. A human scream, raw and resolute, cutting through the storm like a blade. Jake Torres had emerged from the whiteout, wounded but unbroken, dragging a fallen comrade through the snow with a ferocity that bordered on madness. The Zephyrians hesitated, momentarily stunned by the sheer force of will displayed. That moment of hesitation cost them dearly. The humans regrouped and pressed the attack with renewed vigor, turning the tide in a chaotic melee where raw grit outmatched technological superiority. Zeph'wind's eyes glinted with a mixture of respect and bitterness. The human's stubbornness was a weapon as sharp and deadly as any plasma rifle. The Zephyrians had underestimated the depth of their resolve, dismissing their endurance as mere obstinacy. They had missed the truth beneath the surface. Humans fought not just with skill, but with a spiteful ferocity born of survival against impossible odds. The scent of burnt circuitry and scorched metal drifted again through the room as the holographic display flickered, showing the shifts in battle lines, the ebb and flow of conflict. Zeph'wind's mind weighed each strategic failure, each moment where human endurance had turned defeat into victory. It was a lesson learned the hard way, a revelation that shattered the complacency of the Zephyrian admirals. He could still hear the echoes of Maria's commands, crisp and unwavering despite the chaos. Her voice cut through the noise like a beacon, rallying her troops when all seemed lost. The human's ability to adapt, to endure beyond what the Zephyrians considered possible, reshaped the very fabric of interstellar warfare. Zeph'wind's thoughts lingered on the bitter cold of Kael'thar, the relentless wind whipping against his suit, the stinging burn of frostbite creeping through his limbs. The humans had thrived where others would have perished, their bodies pushed beyond breaking, their spirits unyielding. This iron-blooded endurance was not just physical but psychological, a deep well of spite and determination that had fueled every desperate step against the alien invaders. As the ship's engines thrummed steadily beneath him, the veteran commander's voice softened, a solemn acknowledgement of the truth that now shaped alliances and enmities across the stars. The humans were not merely survivors, they were a force of nature, relentless and unforgiving, their endurance a weapon that no species could afford to underestimate. The room grew quieter, the holograms dimming as the reverence for that first revelation settled like a shadow. Zeph'wind's eyes narrowed, the flicker of amber light burning brighter with resolve. The negotiations that followed that fierce campaign had begun instantly, born not of trust, but of grudging respect, and the tacit understanding that to face humanity was to face a storm of iron and spite. In the silence, the veteran's thoughts traced the path from that frozen battlefield to the present day. A legacy forged in ice and fire, a testament to human endurance that had forever altered the calculus of war. The Zephyrians had learned, painfully and irrevocably, that the heart of human combat was not in strategy alone, but in the indomitable spirit that refused to break. The story of Kael'thar was not just a tale of conflict. It was a revelation, a warning etched in memory and steel, that shaped the uneasy peace, now held in delicate balance among the stars. Zeph'wind's voice, steady and measured, carried the weight of that truth, a testament to the iron-blooded endurance that had turned a near, certain defeat into the first step toward negotiation and wary alliance. As the hum of the starship continued its steady song, Zeph'wind's gaze drifted to the void beyond the viewport, the endless expanse where the legacy of that fierce endurance still echoed, a silent promise that humans, once underestimated, would never be overlooked again. The glare of the twin suns cast long, wavering shadows across the scarred plains of Velkara Prime, painting the landscape in hues of blood and bronze. I remember standing there, shoulder to shoulder with the humans, feeling the sharp bite of the alien wind against my carapace. The air was thick with the metallic scent of spent energy cells and the acrid smoke of ruptured fuel lines from shattered Zephyrian assault vehicles. Around me, the ground trembled faintly under the distant thunder of rolling artillery shells, their trails like deadly comets streaking across the ochre sky. It was in that brutal moment of chaos, amidst the dissonant chorus of explosions and desperate cries, that I glimpsed, for the second time, the true nature of human warfare, a revelation that would forever shift my understanding of combat strategy and interspecies cooperation. The Zephyrian Admirals had always prided themselves on unwavering discipline, meticulous planning, and overwhelming firepower. Our battle doctrine was rigid, honed over millennia of conflict across the star systems. We struck hard, we struck fast, and we struck with unrelenting force. Yet, facing the humans, we quickly realized that their warcraft was less about brute strength and more about relentless adaptation, an ever-evolving dance of ingenuity and spite against the odds. I recall vividly the moment when Maria Torres, the human commander, ordered a sudden withdrawal under the guise of tactical retreat. The Zephyrian vanguard bristled at what seemed to be a reckless move. But Maria's eyes burned with an unyielding fire. She didn't just pull back to regroup, she pulled back to bait, to lure the enemy into our trap. It was a gambit steeped in the kind of calculated risk that Zephyrians were trained to avoid. As the Zephyrian troops advanced with confident arrogance, sure of their impending victory, the humans transformed the battlefield. What had been a straightforward opening turned into a labyrinth of ambushes and counterattacks. The remnants of a ruined outpost became a fortress, its skeletal remains repurposed and reinforced with makeshift barriers and concealed firing positions. The humans moved with a fluidity that was almost chaotic, but beneath that chaos lay an intricate web of tactics and strategy. I could see the frustration mounting among our ranks. The Zephyrian Admirals, those paragons of tradition, began to falter as their plans unraveled piece by piece. Yet, the humans remained steadfast, their morale unbroken, their resolve sharpened by every setback. It was the kind of stubborn, spite-fueled determination that seemed to feed the very air around them. The ground beneath our feet was scarred with the echoes of relentless guerrilla tactics. Humans twisted the terrain to their advantage, employing rapid flanking maneuvers that left our flanks exposed, then disappearing into the dust clouds before we could mount an effective counterstrike. Their soldiers moved in unpredictable patterns, blending aggressive assaults with sudden retreats, confusing our targeting algorithms and forcing us to adapt on the fly. As a Zephyrian commander, I was trained to maintain control, to ensure that every movement was precise, every order followed without hesitation. But in that maelstrom of adaptive tactical ingenuity, I found myself unmoored, struggling to keep pace with the human improvisations. Maria's voice, calm yet commanding over the comms, was a beacon amid the disarray, guiding her troops through an ever-shifting battlefield. The human soldiers, like Jake Torres, Maria's brother, embodied that spirit. I observed him leading small squads in swift, decisive strikes against our supply lines, sabotaging our resource depots with an efficiency that belied his youth. He moved through the ruins like a shadow, silent and deadly, exploiting weaknesses in our defenses with relentless precision. There was a moment etched deeply in my memory. A moment when Jake, separated from his unit and surrounded by Zephyrian shock troopers, refused to surrender. Instead, he unleashed a barrage of carefully placed explosives, turning the tide of a skirmish and buying precious time for reinforcements. His defiance, almost reckless by our standards, was a testament to the human will to fight against overwhelming odds. The scent of burning fuel mingled with the coppery tang of blood, saturating the air as battle raged on. The rhythmic thrum of pulse rifles fired in rapid bursts echoed across the field, punctuated by the sharp crack of energy blades slicing through armored plating. Each clash, each explosion, was a revelation, a lesson etched in fire and steel. Through it all, I began to understand that human warfare was less about predictable patterns and more about embracing uncertainty. Their doctrine was not a rigid code, but a living, breathing entity, constantly evolving in response to new threats. Where we Zephyrians saw chaos, they saw opportunity. Where we relied on overwhelming force, they relied on cunning and adaptability. This adaptive tactical ingenuity was born from the crucible of Earth's own history. A history marked by countless conflicts where survival hinged on quick thinking and unyielding resolve. It was a legacy carried forward by every soldier who donned a human uniform, a legacy that transformed the battlefield into a dynamic arena where the unexpected was not just anticipated but welcomed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the battlefield into a tapestry of shadow and fading light, the final confrontation loomed. The Zephyrian admirals, now wary and humbled, sought to consolidate their remaining forces for a decisive strike. But the humans had already anticipated this, their countermeasures seamlessly integrated into a larger strategy that turned our own momentum against us. In the dying light, I witnessed Maria standing amidst the remnants of the battle, her gaze fixed on the stars above. There was no victorious cheer, no triumphant cry, only the quiet resilience of a commander who knew that every negotiation, every alliance, was forged in the fires of mutual respect and understanding. That day on Velcara Prime was the second revelation. The moment I realized that human spite was not merely a stubborn refusal to yield, but a profound strategic asset. It was the ember that kindled their adaptability, the spark that ignited their tactical ingenuity. It was why every species, including the proud Zephyrians, had come to fear and respect Earth's military doctrine. In the aftermath, as we gathered for negotiations, the atmosphere was thick with an unspoken acknowledgement. The humans had challenged us not just with weapons, but with a mindset that defied convention. Their spite was a force multiplier, transforming adversity into advantage with relentless creativity. It was a lesson that reshaped interstellar diplomacy and warfare alike. Now, years later, as I recount these battles, I am reminded of the stormy plains of Velcara Prime, the scent of smoke and scorched earth, the echo of pulse rifles, the indomitable spirit of humans who fought with a spite that defied reason. It is a story not just of conflict but of revelation, a testament to the power of adaptive tactical ingenuity that continues to echo across the stars. The air in the dimly lit chamber was thick with the scent of aged metal and a faint trace of ionized energy, lingering from the ancient relics around us. I could almost hear the ghostly echoes of battles long past, reverberating through the cold walls of the Zephyrian war archives. Even after all these years, memories of those days alongside the humans surged through me with vivid clarity, as if the past were unfolding once more before my eyes. It was during the darkest hours of the conflict, when hope seemed a fragile thread stretched thin across the endless void, that the true nature of human cohesion and loyalty revealed itself to me. I had always known humans were resilient, stubborn even, but I had underestimated the unyielding bond they forged with one another. This bond was not merely a product of strategy or training. It was something elemental, almost sacred, woven into the very marrow of their being. I remember standing on the observation deck of the flagship Zephyr's Edge, staring out into the cold starfield as the dreadnoughts aligned for the impending engagement. The distant glimmer of the enemy fleet shimmered like a broken constellation against the dark canvas of space. Beside me, Maria Torres stood silent, her eyes fixed on the tactical display, muscles taut with anticipation. There was a quiet intensity in her demeanor that I had come to respect deeply, a calm fury that belied the storm raging inside her. The humans had suffered losses, grievous ones, and yet their spirits remained unbroken. It was during these moments that I witnessed the strength of their loyalty firsthand. Not the blind loyalty of fear or obligation, but a fierce, intelligent devotion to one another, to their comrades, their families, and to the cause they believed in. This was a far cry from the rigid hierarchies of Zephyrian command, or the cold pragmatism of air-sex scientists. It was something raw, visceral. As the fleet engaged, the sharp crackle of comms filled the bridge, punctuated by the rhythmic pulse of warning sirens and the hum of power cores throbbing beneath our feet. The tactical displays flickered, with the sudden emergence of enemy fighters, their silhouettes darting like shadows across the void. In the chaos, I caught sight of Jake Torres, Maria's younger brother, maneuvering his fighter with a reckless precision that defied his novice status. His voice, steady yet tinged with urgency, crackled through the comms as he coordinated with his squadron. Despite the hailstorm of laser fire and the shuddering tremors of explosions, Jake never faltered. It was not mere skill that sustained them. It was the unspoken trust etched into every maneuver. Each pilot knew that behind them, their comrades would cover their blind spots, shield their flanks, and bleed with them if necessary. This was no mere tactical advantage. It was a living, breathing organism of solidarity. Suddenly, a warning flared across the bridge. A rogue enemy cruiser had broken through the defensive perimeter and was closing in fast on our vulnerable supply lines. Erzik, ever analytical, was quick to calculate the odds, an almost certain massacre, if we engaged head-on. But Maria's decision came swift and unyielding. She ordered a counterstrike, rallying the human fighters and our Zephyrian escorts into a tight formation, a symphony of calculated aggression and unbreakable trust. The ensuing battle was a maelstrom of light and sound. The sharp staccato of plasma rounds echoed against the hull, and the acrid smell of burnt circuitry mingled with the metallic tang of recycled air. I watched as the human pilots executed complex maneuvers, weaving through the enemy's fire with an almost choreographed grace. Through the haze of combat, their voices remained calm, issuing concise commands and urgent warnings, each syllable reinforcing the unbreakable chain linking them. In the heart of the fray, I saw Jake's fighter take a direct hit, systems flickering and alarms blaring. Instead of retreating, he positioned his crippled ship as a shield for a smaller, damaged ally, absorbing fire that would have otherwise meant certain destruction. The sheer determination in his stance and the raw defiance in his eyes spoke volumes about the depth of their loyalty. No one was expendable. Every life mattered. It was in that moment I understood what set humans apart. Their spite, yes, but more profoundly their unwavering cohesion. Even when the odds were stacked against them, even in the face of overwhelming adversity and the prospect of death, they stood together, an unbreakable unit forged not just by discipline, but by an indomitable will to survive and protect. The enemy cruiser, overwhelmed by the coordinated assault, finally faltered, its weapon systems reduced to smoldering ruins. The tide of battle shifted, and the supply lines remained intact. The relief was palpable. The crew's breaths came heavier, mingled with the faint hum of victory. Yet, beneath the surface of triumph lay the bitter taste of loss and the understanding that the fight was far from over. As the dust settled, I found myself reflecting on the lessons etched into the blood and fire of that day. The Zephyrian Admirals, with their centuries of experience and tactical prowess, had underestimated the human spirit. Their doctrine, grounded in cold calculation, failed to account for the chaotic, unpredictable force of human loyalty, an unyielding chain that refused to break under pressure. Back in the quiet moments aboard the ship, I observed Maria as she moved among her crew, offering words of encouragement, absorbing their fears and hopes with a steady presence. Her leadership was not just command, it was empathy, an understanding born from shared hardship and mutual respect. It was this human quality that ERSEC and I came to recognize as the cornerstone of their military doctrine, an unshakable foundation of trust and loyalty that no enemy could easily dismantle. The memory of that battle, the sights, sounds, and sensations, remained etched in my mind long after the war had ended. The heat of the plasma fireball illuminating the void, the sharp tang of ozone from overloaded systems, the rhythmic thrum of the fleet's engines as they surged forward in unison, all these details painted a picture of a people who fought not just for victory, but for each other. Years later, As I recounted these stories to my fellow Zephyrians, I often emphasized this third revelation. It was not the weapons, nor the technology, nor even the cunning tactics that made the humans formidable. It was their unyielding cohesion and loyalty, a spiteful, relentless force that bound them together, transforming a group of individuals into something far greater than the sum of their parts. This realization changed how we approached alliance and conflict. The humans had taught us that true strength lay in the bonds forged amidst chaos. That loyalty could turn the tide of war more decisively than any fleet maneuver. It was a revelation that reshaped not only our military strategies, but our very understanding of what it meant to stand united. Even now, when I gaze upon the stars, I carry that lesson with me. The memory of human spite and loyalty burns bright, a beacon reminding me that in the vast, unforgiving darkness of the cosmos, it is not just might or intellect that ensures survival, but the fierce, unbreakable bonds forged between souls willing to fight together, come what may. The battle raged with an intensity that seared itself into the memory of every witness. The air was thick with the acrid tang of burning plasma and the metallic scent of scorched circuitry. Above the scarred surface of the Zephyrian outpost, the sky churned with dark, roiling clouds pierced by the relentless flashes of energy beams. It was a symphony of chaos, a violent crescendo that seemed to echo the very heartbeat of the conflict itself. From the vantage point of the command deck, Zeph'wind's gaze was locked on the unfolding chaos below. His sharp eyes traced the erratic bursts of light where human forces clashed desperately with the Zephyrian defensive lines. The ground vibrated with the thunder of heavy ordnance, while distant explosions painted the horizon with bursts of molten fire. Through the thick haze of smoke, the silhouettes of soldiers moved. Fierce, relentless, and unyielding, Zeph'wind's mind churned with cold calculation, but beneath the veneer of tactical assessment, a grudging respect simmered. Humans were an enigma, defying expectations at every turn. Their doctrine was unconventional, their strategies seemingly reckless, yet they carved a path through the Zephyrian forces with a stubbornness that bordered on defiance. It was not just their weapons or tactics. It was something deeper, a fire that no amount of suppression seemed capable of extinguishing. Down on the battlefield, Commander Maria Torres was a tempest embodied. Her figure, silhouetted against a backdrop of smoldering wreckage, moved with lethal precision. Every command she issued was crisp, every decision decisive. The crackle of her comms was punctuated by the steady cadence of her voice, a beacon amidst the cacophony. Her presence inspired those around her, transforming despair into determination. Nearby, Jake Torres fought with a fierce resolve that defied the searing pain in his side. The bullet wound was a cruel reminder of their precarious position, but it did not slow him. His hands were steady, his aim true. As he covered advancing human squads, the scent of burnt ozone and sweat mingled in his nostrils, a grim reminder of the ordeal. Yet, his eyes burned with an unyielding light, a refusal to yield, no matter the cost. Zeph'wind's attention was drawn to the human engineering units working under fire. Their figures stooped over damaged equipment, repairing what seemed impossible to salvage. Sparks flew as they welded and rewired, the smell of molten metal mingling with the harsh cries of battle. It was a dance of survival and ingenuity, a testament to human tenacity that baffled many of his own kind. Despite the mounting casualties and the overwhelming firepower unleashed by the Zephyrian Admirals, the humans pressed forward. The alien defensive formations cracked, but did not collapse. Zeph'wind noted with growing unease that every breach was met with a counterattack, every setback a renewed surge of will. The humans adapted swiftly, their tactics evolving in the heat of battle with a fluidity that defied prediction. The sky above rumbled ominously as a Zephyrian dreadnought descended, its massive silhouette blotting out the fading light. Its plasma cannons roared, unleashing torrents of energy that tore through the human ranks. Columns of soldiers fell, the ground erupting in fiery blossoms where they stood. Yet even as the dreadnought advanced, Maria's voice cut through the turmoil, coordinating evasive maneuvers and directing concentrated fire at the massive vessel's vulnerable points. Zeph'wind felt a flicker of admiration. The humans fought not as individuals, but as a unified force, their cohesion unbroken even in the face of overwhelming odds. It was a spirit forged in the crucible of relentless conflict, one that no amount of firepower could shatter. As the battle reached its fevered pitch, the Zephyrian lines began to falter. The ground was littered with the fallen, their bodies a stark testament to the ferocity of the human assault. Zeph'wind's thoughts raced. Retreat seemed inevitable, defeat all but certain. Yet amidst the chaos, he observed something else. The humans did not celebrate or gloat. They moved with grim determination, their objective clear and unrelenting. The scent of ozone was suddenly replaced by the sharp tang of explosives as a human demolition squad breached the central command hub. The explosion that followed was deafening, shaking the very foundations of the outpost. Zeph'wind's sensors registered the collapse of critical systems and the sudden loss of communication among Zephyrian fleets. In that moment, the tide turned irrevocably. The Zephyrian forces, once confident in their supremacy, now faced a relentless foe whose spirit seemed unbreakable. Zeph'wind felt the weight of centuries of tradition and pride shatter beneath the undeniable truth. These humans were unlike any enemy encountered before. As the dust settled and the echoes of battle faded into a tense silence, Zeph'wind's mind returned to the stories he had heard in his youth. Tales of human resilience and defiance. Now, having witnessed it firsthand, he understood why every species that had faced Earth's military forces spoke of them with equal parts fear and respect. It was not just their technology or their tactics. It was the unbreakable human spirit that refused to yield, that turned every defeat into a stepping stone toward victory. The battlefield lay scarred and silent, but within its desolation burned a flame that no force could extinguish. The Zephyrian admirals had underestimated the human spite, and in doing so, they had awakened a force that would shape the fate of the galaxy for generations to come. The battlefield had quieted. Where moments ago the air had been rent by the sharp crack of plasma fire and the heavy thudding of percussion rounds, now only the distant hum of settling engines and the soft rustle of scorched foliage remained. The acrid scent of burnt ozone mingled with the earthy fragrance of trampled grass, creating a peculiar contrast that clung to everything like a stubborn fog. The sky, once streaked with tracer fire and the fiery arcs of missiles, now stretched vast and empty above the scarred landscape, its pale blue suffused with the gentle glow of a sinking sun. Zeph'wind stood on the ridge, his multifaceted eyes scanning the scene below, taking in the battered remains of his once proud fleet mingled awkwardly with the resolute formations of human ground forces. The Zephyrian cruisers, their sleek hulls pockmarked and smoking, lay haphazardly beached along the riverbank, their engines silent for the first time in days. The humans, their uniforms dirtied and bloodied, had consolidated their positions in a rigid perimeter, their weapons lowered but ready, faces taut with exhaustion yet unyielding in their resolve. The veteran commander inhaled deeply, the cool air filling the chambers in his thorax. He felt the lingering sting of defeat, but also the unmistakable pulse of respect. This was not the outcome anyone had anticipated at the campaign's outset. The Zephyrians, seasoned and confident, had underestimated one critical factor: the indomitable human spirit, spiteful, unrelenting, and utterly unpredictable. Zeph'wind's thoughts drifted back to the early days of the conflict, when arrogance had blinded many of his peers. The humans' initial tactics seemed primitive, relying on brute force and unorthodox maneuvers. But as the war dragged on, it became clear that beneath that rough exterior lay a cunning and adaptability that defied all prior calculations. It was a lesson paid for in blood and fire. Now, with the immediate threat quelled, a different kind of engagement began to take shape. An uneasy truce that might, if handled with care and wisdom, evolve into something far more enduring. The path to this juncture was etched in scars, deeper than the physical wounds on the battlefield. The Zephyrian command ship, a formidable vessel named Gale's Wrath, had been reduced to a skeleton of smoldering metal, drifting helplessly in orbit. Ersek, the alien scientist whose innovations had once promised to secure Zephyrian dominance, now served as an unexpected emissary, his mind weary but alert. He had witnessed human tenacity firsthand and come to recognize an invaluable potential ally within their stubbornness. As Zeph'wind descended the ridge, the crunch of gravel under his serrated feet was a stark reminder of the fragile ground upon which this new chapter was built. The humans awaited him in the battered command outpost, a makeshift structure of steel and salvage panels that bore the marks of relentless combat. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of sweat, gun oil, and something less tangible: cautious hope. Maria Torres, the human commander who had orchestrated the defense with relentless precision, regarded him with a mixture of wariness and weary respect. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, mirrored his own fatigue and the weight of leadership. Between them lay a table cluttered with star charts, communication devices, and hastily sketched battle plans, symbols of both conflict and the tentative steps toward cooperation. Silent for a moment, Zeph'wind allowed himself to appreciate the gravity of the moment. In his past, he had witnessed countless alliances crumble under suspicion and pride. But here, in this fragile truce, he sensed a new beginning, one forged not from convenience, but from a grudging acknowledgement of mutual strength and the shared desire to survive. The initial exchanges were cautious, words measured, each syllable weighed against the heavy shadows of recent losses. Yet beneath the formalities, a palpable current of understanding flowed. Both sides had tasted the bitterness of underestimation. Both bore the scars of miscalculation, and both recognized that in unity lay the key to confronting threats far greater than any single species. Zeph'wind's mind wandered to Jake Torres, the human soldier whose reckless bravery had turned the tide in several skirmishes. The young man's name was whispered among the ranks, a symbol of the unpredictable ferocity that defined humanity's fighting spirit. It was a reminder that beneath the veneer of discipline and order lay a wildfire, one that could ignite hope or devastation with equal fervor. The evening deepened, and with it the shadows cast by the dying light. The metallic scent within the outpost was gradually replaced by the softer aroma of brewed tea, an unexpected but welcome gesture from the humans. As Zeph'wind accepted the offering, he felt the invisible barriers between species begin to erode, replaced by a fragile bridge built from shared experience and newfound respect. Outside, the landscape bore silent witness to the transformation. The charred trees, standing like sentinels, seemed less like remnants of destruction and more like guardians of a hard-earned peace. The distant murmur of wildlife returning lent a subtle harmony to the scene, as if the natural world itself endorsed this tentative alliance. For the Zephyrian commander, the resolution was not a simple victory or defeat, but a complex tapestry woven from loss, endurance, and the spark of cooperation. He understood now that power was not measured solely in fleets or weaponry, but in the capacity to adapt, to forgive, and to forge bonds from the fires of conflict. As the night deepened, plans for joint endeavors began to take shape, missions that would combine Zephyrian technology with human ingenuity, strategies refined by bitter experience. The negotiations were far from over, but the first steps had been taken, marked by a shared commitment to transcend past animosities. Zeph'wind gazed upward, where the first stars emerged, their distant light a quiet testament to the vastness beyond and the possibilities within. The war had tested them all, but it had also illuminated a path forward, one where understanding could temper spite, and alliance could flourish in the shadow of former enmity. In this moment, under the vast canopy of the cosmos, a new chapter began, not just for Zephyrians or humans, but for all who dared to dream beyond the boundaries of fear and misconception. It was a resolution born not from the cessation of conflict alone, but from the enduring belief that even the deepest wounds could heal through the strength of shared purpose.